Hey, thanks, Paul. Good to be here. Honored with the panel and looking forward to the conversation today.
Oh, the COVID beard is gone too. Oh, he's really ready to go. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we don't have a sponsor for this segment. I made sure we didn't have one just so that we could use the full time to get into this. We had a conversation a couple days ago about the topic. We shared some notes. Just so you know, Matt sent me a short dissertation on his thoughts. So I don't know if we're going to be able to fit them all in. And, Bob kind of responded and said, yeah, like what Matt said. He's like, I'm going to try to say one thoughtful thing and let Matt go. So we'll see where the conversation goes. But I think that generally, to frame up the conversation, that co-ops have specifically been about, they've been full of contention. They've been really based on this leveraging power, leveraging kind of one will over another will to make sure things are done in a certain way. And maybe we've gotten off the rails, and maybe we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, kind of ignoring the actual thing we're trying to accomplish in the midst of many layers of management, many layers of representatives, and kind of have separated the intent from what's actually happening. So I think that's something that a lot of dealers will agree upon. Probably a lot of people who manage co-op programs realize in some ways it's become an efficient way to spend money, not necessarily an efficient way to get results and get attention. So with that being said, Matt, you represent, how many brands is it?
Paul, we got 20 OEMs that we're representing.
Okay, so maybe just first give us a short Cliff's Notes on what it is, who it is that you represent. You don't have to go by names, but 20 OEMs and kind of a little context. You have a broader perspective than most marketing directors or dealers because you see the good, bad, and the ugly across all of them. So why don't you just give us a little summary of what you represent, OEMs, and then like what your perspective and experience has been with co-ops macro.
Yeah, look, the elevator pitch on West Herr is we're a 26 store group, regionally dense, powerhouse in Western New York. We have 20 dealerships within a 30-mile radius of each other. We have 4 more in Rochester, New York. So all in 60-mile radius, our entire group, 2,200 employees. We sell 50,000 cars a year. We service 400,000 cars a year. Our new car market share is 40% in our market, and we represent about 30% of the dealer inventory on used cars. So we have this broad perspective, and I have a privilege of working with all these OEMs. So first, let me just start with the co-op conversation. I want to deploy as much empathy in the conversation as possible because co-op programs are hard to design. So I want to start with that. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're hard to design is because you have single point dealers, you have regionally dense groups like West Herr, and then you have national powerhouses that are all over the country, right? And a variety of different branding initiatives and efforts, different markets, different consumers. So fundamentally, the rule book for co-op is set up to fail because you cannot have a one-size-fits-all answer to the entire scope of the industry. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just want to, that's kind of like the basis that I'm coming at it from, is that it's just a really challenging thing to even articulate. But brands have this self-driven interest in protecting their own brand, right? Ford wants to protect how Ford is presented in the market. Chevy, Infiniti, whatever, all the brands care about how their thing is. And if you talk to an agency that reps those brands, they got this vision, color palette, fonts, style, audience it connects to. So they're trying to respect that. And I think that's where co-ops started, right? It's like, we're going to give you a little money, but you got to do it in a way that we approve, right? So it started slowly with approvals, Ansira, brand compliance, things of that nature.
And so, like, starting off with that empathy, right? It's like, if you're coaching a basketball player and if he's a point guard, you can't coach all the point guards the same way. They have different skill sets. They have different reach. They have different speed. So that's the empathy that you're coming into the conversation with. What is the main pain? Like, what is the one thing that you can say, like, this is where co-op breaks down?
Well, look, there's a burden of approval in co-op. So, and that burden falls on the dealership. And so, simple example, a regional factory will come out with a short-term incentive for this weekend or next weekend, right? Like, we're going to get an extra $500 out to the market because we really got to move that metal, right? There's not enough runway to even get things approved through the ecosystem to tell anybody about it, right? So we can't get it approved through Ansira. We can't. So what dealers have to do is you have to guess, or you have to do your best because you know the program, you know what gets approved. You just have to shoot and hope you don't get the strike. But this burden of approval, this strike infraction management slows us all down, right? It slows everybody down. It creates friction and added administrative expense in the process. So there's fundamental like weakness with, okay, we got to play by the rules. And the more complicated the tax code gets, the smarter accountant you need to manage it.
Yep, that's a great point. Bob, let's go. You've been quiet for a few minutes. You definitely come at this from a different angle. You have a lot of clients that use Facebook, that probably deploy these dollars on Facebook. What do you see when you look at co-ops? Because in one sense, you're an insider, but in one sense, you're not a dealer. What is your overarching view of co-op and the system in general?
Yeah, to echo what Matt said, to show empathy, it's hard. It's hard to design a co-op program. It's hard to update these programs because things are changing constantly and we've evolved dramatically. But I'll just give you, maybe a bullet point here on the Facebook side that might put it in perspective. And, first and foremost, we're a part of almost every co-op program, and we may be at a different level or a different area, but nonetheless, we are a part of it. But when I look at where our revenue comes from at a dealer level and what they're co-oping and what they're not co-oping, what's interesting is we actually will receive more money from a dealer per month that is not co-opt versus is co-opt. And when I ask them, why don't you co-op? You've got this free money. They say exactly what Matt says. It's too hard. By the time I even put teams to try to figure it out and do that, like we're already on to the next thing. So
what you're saying, just in to summarize that up, it's like they're willing to forego the money because it's just way too much effort.
They're willing to forego the money and also to add on, they may see additional performance doing something that might not be co-op compliant, and they'd rather have the performance than the compliancy. So it's a combination of a couple different variables.
Sure, and understanding that sometimes the compliant thing isn't generating results, and that very well could be just because it's a much easier to deploy tactic. So it's easy to deploy that at scale, but it might not even be generating results. So the dealer is saying, actually, I'm going to spend my money where I know I can generate results. So one thing, Matt, that you and I have talked about, actually the three of us have probably talked about it at some point. We're talking about spending large amounts of money on SEM, on search, and the fact that just spending more money on it doesn't generate more interest. It doesn't generate more traffic. Matt, what is your perspective on that?
So look, I wrote a piece about this called The Propaganda War on LinkedIn, so I'd encourage you to check that out. However, the short version of that is traditional is out, TV, radio, print, digital is in. Nobody asks me how I spend money on television or radio, but everybody asks me how I spend money on Google and Facebook. Right. So there's a fundamental propaganda war at hand, and you need to understand that. But, there's backing up a second, it's about friction. So the reason why a disproportionate amount of money gets spent on Google is because it's the easiest way for a dealer to spend it digitally. So people like me are path of least resistance creatures. We all are as human beings. So when you have $15,000 to spend, and all you have to do is email your vendor, your approved digital SEM vendor, I need to spend $15,000. They ratchet up the dial and you spend $15,000, mission accomplished. The running joke around here is nobody asks me how I spend the co-op money. They only ask me if I don't spend it all. So my accounting team, my dealer principal, my general manager only asks me if I had money go expired. There's an interesting nuance there. So if you're a marketing person, your incentive is to just spend the money. 80% of our ad budget at Herr is covered by co-op. Now, it varies by brand. So some brands it's 0, some brands it's over 100% coverage. But 80%. So it's really important to understand that you got to operate co-op programs and you got to efficiently get your money, because that drives dealer profitability too. You can't just waste it all over the place, right? You got to understand the game. But it shows the importance of the way these co-op rules are designed, because we're making decisions based on the co-op rules as they're structured.
So with that being said, what can't you spend money on that you wish you could? I mean, we know the path of least resistance. We have like agency structures that are, have maybe become efficient mechanisms to spend all that money to avoid that question, what dollar has expired, right? The actual the negative consequence of having to report that to your CFO. Oh, this money expired. They see it as a loss, right? It's just very clear. So they incentivize you to just spend it, which means an agency structure is going to come along to help you do that easily, right? Because the worst thing that could happen is we don't spend it, even if we're wasting it. What are the things that you can't use it on that you would like to?
So I don't know if it's a question of can't use it. It's about how money gets deployed and the recommendations that dealerships get to spend money.
Yep.
Right. So, for example, Shift Digital as an agency is an intermediary company that provides consultative guidance to OEMs with how they need to operate digital marketing programs for dealerships. So the OEM raises their hand and says, I'm not quite sure how to do this through the dealer network. I got 5,000 dealers. I don't know. Shift Digital says, I have this playbook. Here's how this works. Here's how you can allocate some funds, but we got to do some things. And we create partnerships via preferred programs, right? Which limits choice that dealerships can use to go to market. We were talking about digital retailing before we got on the call, Bob and I, and I've been fighting against the propaganda of digital retailing recently. But even with my insight and knowledge, the political pressure is so great that we will have 3 digital retailing tools installed on 3 separate websites in the coming month or 2. Just because I can't be the only dealer in FCA land without a digital retailing tool. Now, I know I'm using some specificity, and that's not designed to poke at anybody in particular. I just want to bring the point that there's fees associated with all of these middlemen, middle folks, intermediary layers. I have like 30 Shift Digital and counterpart advisors that call on individual websites of mine. How many people do I need to call on to check on my website that gets 3,000 sessions a month?
Versus, right? What's westher.com get?
250,000.
Right.
But we have, I don't need another digital advisor at dealer.com. But oh, by the way, the contract was set up that said, if you use this vendor, you have to supply this support person. So then they staff up, ramp up, you have scale problems, you have go-to-market problems with that scale.
So with that being said, do you think there's a transparency issue in co-op? It seems like a lot of this stuff, like dealers, what I hear, dealers they're not quite sure what they're paying for. It seems like, in an age of transparency where the retail side is demanding extreme transparency, do we have a transparency problem in co-op?
We have an economics problem in the co-op system. And by that, what I mean is, let me give you an example. We use a lifecycle marketing tool, Auto Alert. We've been using it for like 7 years, okay? We had a group rate. We negotiated a group rate. Ford Direct comes and says, hey, we got this great program. It's called Auto Alert. We say, great, we already use it. Guess what happened to our bill? Our bill went up. So we ended up paying more for software and direct mail services via Auto Alert because of a pre-arranged agreement that the vendor had to oblige to the fixed pricing model. So a dealership that was already taking advantage of some scale and services, right, ended up having to subsequently pay more for the product, right? So I think that, and that combined with billing through the part statement, there's tremendous opacity in billing through part statements. Fees are getting hidden. You don't even know what your percentage of admin fee is for your SEM spend, things of that nature. So I think we, as an industry, need to work on improving the open-minded dialogue to, like, here's all the fees in the system, right? And here's how we might be able to take some of the expense out of the system to move towards a more efficient model.
Okay, we have 7 minutes left. I'd like to hear from Bob on one topic, and then I'd like to spend our last few minutes maybe being a little bit reimagining, right? The topic of this, like, let's talk about some things we could do in order to help free up some of the friction within the process, right? It's not going to all happen at once, but these are ways OEMs and dealers can work together to make some measurable improvements in the co-op program so that we can all thrive, whether you're an OEM or your dealer, industry partner like me, right? The more efficient we are, the better we're all doing. So we'd like to end on that note. But Bob, I'd like to come over. So Facebook, I've seen the Facebook playbook for dealers. I've seen the full funnel strategy. My agency Congruent, we really deploy to that. And a lot of that has to do with, making relevant content and spending some time and energy on creative, targeting the right audiences, looking at the insights generated by targeting those audiences to create other audiences and really track things back to actual sales. From your perspective in your seat, Bob, what is the essence of that full funnel strategy Like, and what does Facebook recommend that anyone should do, whether you're a dealer or a co-op program or OEM? What is the recommendation?
The recommendation is the playbook, right? And I just told this.
Just summarize it. Yeah, right. Summarize it for us. If someone hasn't read it, right.
I just did a webinar to a dealer group right before this call. And I said, listen, I'm not smart enough to think of these strategies, right? These strategies are strategies that you all have been deploying for years. Mm-hmm. You just didn't know you could deploy them on Facebook. And it goes from a brand strategy, which is, why should I buy from Herr versus another dealership, all the way down to a CRM remarketing strategy, right? With VIN-specific targeting in between and so on and so forth. And it's truly meant to be that full funnel, because we've seen consumer behavior react greater to a full funnel strategy than just a lead gen strategy or just a sales event based strategy. So, when I look at it from our point of view, we see what is performing. We have purview over thousands of dealerships. And, one of the things that I need to do a better job at, truth be told, is to work with these co-op programs and show them this. Mm-hmm. Like, this is how I need this to be executed, and work with them to say, if you choose to go a certified partner route, then I really need you to make sure you're on them to do it the right way, execute it the right way, because I'm not boots on the ground. I don't have a team boots on the ground. I have to rely on these programs to represent us correctly. And I'll be honest, man, I did an audit for a manufacturer, because the manufacturer was given a dealer network a sum of money to execute something. And when I did the audit, I learned a lot. I learned how much was not executed correctly, and a lot of stuff was basic. So back to the playbook, full funnel, it works.
This is going to be maybe a hard one to quantify, but how much more efficient? What room do we have for efficiency within all the dollars being spent in co-op? Can we get 30% more efficiency out of the dollars, in your opinion?
Or more. Matt.
That might be low. Okay, yeah. Right.
Yeah. Listen, I challenge dealers that they could cut 30 to 50% of their existing marketing spend and purchase more strategically and sell the same amount, if not more. So just doing that, they'll perform well. But Matt brought up something that is the challenge. It's the economics, right? There's fees involved, and I'll tell you this one story, and I'll be quiet because I know we're on a time limit. But my team handles the top 10 dealer groups in the country. I was in the room with one of them, and their chief marketing officer and the person that handles the business for us shows up how much money that they spent with us on advertising, actual media. And I watched the CMO, look at their book and be like, look over, I was like, that isn't right. And the gentleman goes, no, that's right. And the person goes, no, I have twice as much on my line item. And the person that handled the business for us goes, well, that's the media spend. That doesn't take into account all of the fees.
The management and fees and things like that. So there you go. And I've seen that firsthand between clients that we've worked with at the agency, cutting the spend by that much for a better result. Because of efficiency and deploying to your suggestions in the playbook. Matt, gonna pivot back to you. What are some things that, if you could wave a magic wand and a co-op would kind of lay back a little bit and allow you to do, would, if they could ease some restrictions, what's on your wish list?
So I think there's a couple like practical recommendations I could try to just float out to the industry for anybody.
Let's do it. No, I hope that people are going to hear this and at least get them thinking.
Yeah. So I think number one, I would try to encourage everybody to try to simplify the tax code, right? And focus on flexibility, speed, and execution. You want tier 3 retailers to move fast. So doing everything in your power to build systems and structures and incentives around moving as fast as possible. That could be something as small as designing a landing page that dealers can use, a competitive landing page between your brand new model that you're all excited about and how it stacks up against the other small SUV in the market, and just give it to the whole dealer network. Don't finger point to the dealer network and say, hey, you got to create a landing page, because dealer networks aren't structured historically to create that type of content. Yep. So understand where you're weak, where there's a weakness in the dealership network. So flexibility, speed, and execution, right? Where there's one approach that gets rid of all the approval process altogether. That'd be a more extreme approach, but I think it would allow dealers to focus their efforts on profitability. I think the OEMs should care mostly about profitability. I have one brand in particular, I won't call them out, but they get way more money in co-op money than they need. and the margins are declining. We make peanuts selling new cars, right? We're losing money in that new car department, but I have 6 figures of dollars to spend on whatever it is that I want to spend it on, right? So I think redeploying that dollar back to dealer profitability allows for a greater employment base, allows for dealerships to innovate and create technologies and processes around a better customer experience, which is ultimately what dealerships do. We're the human beings that service the customer to buy the car, right? So enable the people to do the job. Don't think that you can just do it from 3,000 miles away. If it was that simple, we all would have been replaced by kiosks already.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to float across one suggestion, not as a dealer or as Facebook, but just as an agency. I know that creative is the variable in whether or not people stop scrolling or keep scrolling, and throwing price payment ads out there just wastes people's time in most cases. And Bob will tell you that, you know, the ads don't perform. Show a price payment to a random or a fresh face, and they just keep scrolling, and it's expensive to run it because nobody wants to see it. There hasn't traditionally been a lot of space for making good creative within co-op programs. And so I know the response that a good creative gets and how much, you know, on a magnitude of scale, much more efficient that can be. So I'm going to throw that into the mix as well. Bob, I'm going to pivot to you for like 15 seconds to see, do you have one thing that you can say to co-ops that you would like to see, like the ball move forward a little bit on?
Let the dealers make the decision on what they want to spend it on.
There you
Let
go.
them spend it how they want to spend it. And by the way, it goes both ways, right?
Yep.
It'll be greater margin for the manufacturer. It'll be better margin for the dealer, because co-op is just margin, you know, margin out of the manufacturer. So,
Gentlemen,
One final thought. I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
Do it.
Tier 2. Let's just eliminate Tier 2.
oh, let's talk about the stick of dynamite.
topic
and with
number
that,
5.
and with that, we're going to close the session. Well, good. I think I have all my fingers. I think I threw the dynamite stick far enough before it went off. Gentlemen, thank you so much for giving your insights. We're going to continue this conversation for sure, but thanks for taking some time out of your day to kind of serve the industry and try to make it better.
You're welcome. Thanks, Paul.
Talk to you guys soon.